Hello, welcome back to your second episode of the day for the Eau Rouge podcast, because of course there were two launches today. We've already had the Mercedes launch. If you haven't watched our earlier podcast about that, do go and check that out. And of course today, for this particular one, we're talking about Alpine, newish team to the sport, or exactly the same team just with a name change. But obviously we had the launch today, which was not easy to watch. It was very laggy and it was quite difficult to see what was going on and hear what was going on. But we did get a glimpse of the car, and obviously further images have now come out. And Chris, I've got to say, I'm a huge fan. I think it looks really, really nice, that kind of mix of the British and French flags, the way they were kind of describing it, or the way that they were, talking about it. And the blue, I think, really stands out. I think it looks really nice.
Yes, it is a really, really nice looking car. They've done a great job. It will be immediately identifiable on the grid from a distance. And if it goes as fast as it looks like it should, it's going to be quite an incredible car to watch, I think.
I think we need a blue car on the grid just to add to that color. I don't know if it necessarily actually is going to stand out maybe as much as it looks like in those photos, but I do think you'll be able to see that blue. I was worried that the black was going to darken it down, but obviously we won't really know until it gets out onto the track. But if you remember thinking back to the time in the late 1990s, early 2000s, with that really lovely bright blue Benetton. Some people hated that color. I really liked it. It might be because I have a little bit of a connection to it. That was the first ever Formula One car I ever saw up close, was a Benetton. There was like an exhibition going on near where I lived at the time. So I do like a blue car on the grid, and I think that it will stand out quite nicely. So it will be really nice to see that on the grid. But we have sort of lost the yellow that we have on the grid in the past, where we've had Renault, we've had Jordan, and I suppose even the Lotus, really, although that was maybe more gold. But I suppose maybe I'm getting into too much detail about color, really. That's just it seems to be so important to me, when really we should maybe be talking about some important things on the car. Is there anything that you noticed that has changed from last year's Renault, other than the livery, obviously? So any
The usual floor changes that have come in as a result of the new diffuser rules are obviously present. You can see there must have been some changes to the front of the car. There is a slightly revised front wing and new nose package, and the inclusion of winglets on the rear to help force the air round seems like one of the two major changes. The other big change, of course, is the move to Mecachrome engines, a name we have not seen in Formula One for some time, I think for good reason. But will the change of engine production to a third party have any knock-on effects for Renault this term, or Alpine, should I say? Or is it going to be the same old thing, but with Renault trying to reduce their presence in F1? They've just got Mecachrome, who are French themselves, to put their name on the car.
But why Mecachrome? Just simply because of that French connection? I mean, like you said, the history in F1 is not great. They had the Williams car, of course, in the late 90s, which was, compared to the seasons that had gone before, when Williams were challenging for titles throughout the 1990s up until 97, and then 98 came and they switched engines and it was a disaster. So why is it just that French connection?
I mean, Mecachrome are a precision engineering company, and less disastrously than the Winfield Williams, they were also the play life behind the Benetton play life engine, which did yield 2 second places for Giancarlo Fisichella, which is better than any result that Williams achieved that year. So I think there is always a tendency within France to use French companies where possible, and they were Supertech as well, let's not forget. It was Williams Supertech in 99, British American Racing Supertech in 1999, and Arrows in 2000. So it's a company with some experience. I think that the original Supertech has since been bought out by Renault, so I'm not sure how much will really change, but it's nice to see some old names come back that aren't an endless rehashing of Lotus.
I suppose a little bit of nostalgia there, yeah. I think, though, the biggest thing we have to talk about with this team is the switch to Alpine, but also the fact that Cyril Abiteboul has left. I really hope I'm saying his surname right, Cyril, if you're listening. Apologies. But Cyril's left. How much? That was a bit of a shock, really. There were some rumours kind of flittering around that maybe he wasn't going to be there simply because I think that came from the fact that Renault maybe were underperforming or were not performing to expected standards. But he's gone. Davide Brivio has come in, who's had quite a lot of success with Yamaha and Suzuki in MotoGP. And why have they booted out Cyril? Is Davide Brivio actually going to make that much of a difference? And about why the switch to Alpine, first and foremost, I think.
I think that the big gamble that Renault undertook was signing Daniel Ricciardo. They spent a fortune. They had this company vision that was missed by some margin. I think that Renault genuinely believed they'd be challenging for a title by now, and that failure to, in combination with the huge amount of money they've spent trying to do that, necessitated some change of leadership at the top. De Brivio's done really well over in MotoGP, and I think as Renault look to withdraw and perhaps use their brand for advertising something other than their road car division, it's time for a new head to come in and lead the team. I think this is why you're seeing the return of an experienced driver in Fernando Alonso. It's why they've kept faith with Ocon, possibly the most criminally underrated driver on the grid. And I don't think if their success is hard to come by, that we'll see Alpine in F1 for more than 2 or 3 years. I think they'll be sold on there'll be somebody waiting there to take it over, whether that's the Eurochem group, the Mazepin family, whether this is where Rich Energy is finally going to get their team, or I suppose a new outfit perhaps. I think that this is the last throw of the dice for Renault and Alpine, and that this needs to work for them.
Now, you mentioned Fernando Alonso there, who we're going to obviously move on to talk about being back in F1 again after a few years out. What you said there made sense about Renault bringing Alonso in. It makes sense from that side, but Alonso, he can't seem to let F1 go, can he? He just keeps coming back. Is this a genuine attempt at his next, at that elusive third title that he's been desperately seeking since his old Renault days? And if not, why is he back in F1?
I think he thinks it is. Today marks 20 years to the day that Fernando Alonso made his debut for Minardi in Australia, finishing a very credible 12th. But Alonso should have retired when he left Ferrari. Going back to McLaren was a mistake. He's had 2 seasons out from that mistake, and he's still not really learned his lesson. I don't see Alpine being the comeback he thinks it will. I can see him limping around for 2 seasons. And if it is hugely unsuccessful, I think he and Alpine will bow out at the same time. He's not won a race since Spain 2013. So it's been 7 years since he's still on the top step of the podium. And it's been 6 years since he's still on the podium at all. Last time was Hungary 2014. And how long can you continue to trail around at the back and delude yourself? No matter how good a driver you are, if the equipment isn't there for you, a little bit like we talked about in the Mercedes episode earlier today, you're not going to win. You can't sustain a title challenge in a horrific car or even a midfield car. So I see why he's doing it, but I think if he really stepped back and thought about it, he might not be back for very long.
And he has a history of making some strange moves. I think the move that he made from Ferrari to McLaren, back to McLaren for the second time, I know that McLaren were giving him the opportunity to race an IndyCar so that he could go after that Triple Crown, but it was an obvious move to a team that was going backwards at the time. So he has a history of these kind of strange moves. But also, does that mean, can he still be considered as one of the best drivers on the grid, having now taken 2 years out? Like you said, he's not been on the podium since 2014, not won a race in nearly 8 years. Is he still one of the best?
In terms of class and his pedigree, he will always be one of the best drivers of the 21st century. He was the first man to dethrone Schumacher, a Schumacher who the year before had destroyed the competition, even more really than Hamilton destroyed the competition last year. And in came Fernando Alonso and stopped him in his tracks, took 2 world titles, but for a bad piece of luck, would have had a third in 2007. His greatest issue has been he's always been notoriously difficult to get along with. It's why he had to leave competitive McLaren for Paul Renault. It's why he found himself back at Honda, I think, rather than going back up the grid, despite the fact that his Ferrari days, the 2012 and 2013 seasons were maybe his finest drives in any team, in any car. Fernando Alonso is a very difficult man. And ultimately, he's paid the price with his career. He should have had 4 titles at least, and he's coming away with 2. Surely he knows he's finishing with 2. Does he?
Well, I feel like if he did know that, he wouldn't be back. I think you're right. I think it's for him. It's about that third title, isn't it? Because there is this kind of myth or this legend in Formula One is that to be an all-time great, you need those 3 world titles. I don't know where that's come from. I don't know who that is. But if you look at the drivers in the past that have won those 3 world titles, obviously you've got Schumacher and Fangio, who was always lauded as one of the greatest. And then Vettel, who's got 4, Prost, who had 4. And then again, the legends of the sport like Niki Lauda, Ayrton Senna, those kind of drivers have got those 3 titles. And they seem to have, that third title seems to separate you from the rest of the pack. And I think, to me, I think that's what's on his mind as well. It's that 2 world titles doesn't do him justice. 3 puts you in a different bracket.
Well, I think that's quite an astute observation. I think if you look at Emerson Fittipaldi, who some say was the greatest driver of the 70s, left McLaren, got stuck just short of that elusive third title, and it's cost him, despite the fact that some say he was one of the finest men ever set in a Formula One car. You never hear Fittipaldi's name come up in serious, credible discussions about the greatest drivers in the sport, because he went to his own team, he went to support Brazil and his brother, and it backfired horribly. And this is similar really to the Alonso thing. Alonso is always going to be sat just outside the greatest of all time conversation. Whether or not he merits being in it, which I suspect he genuinely does, because he hasn't got that third title. But the Alpine is not going to give it to him. He's no spring chicken now. He's 39. So is it 1 year younger than Michael Schumacher on his return? And you could see at Schumacher's return with Mercedes, he was just nowhere near. He was made to look average by Rosberg, and then quietly retired again to make way for Lewis Hamilton, who promptly showed what you could do in one of those cars.
And now, as you mentioned earlier, today is the anniversary of his first appearance in F1 20 years ago. I still remember that Minardi. For some reason, one of my really strong memories of Alonso in that Minardi is him crashing at the Variante Alta in Imola, just because it was quite a satisfying wreckage. But I wanted to kind of hark back to some Alonso memories, because I have really mixed feelings about Alonso. I really do want him to win that third title, and I did, when he was with Ferrari. But also at the same time, I think he's been a very controversial figure, and like you said, he's not been that. He's hard to get along with in various teams, as we've seen over the course of history. But I think my favourite Alonso memory's got to be that pass he made on Schumacher around the outside of the 130R in Suzuka, Japan. I just think it's a stunning move. I really stopped liking him after that when he blocked Lewis Hamilton in the pits in Hungary 2007 during qualifying. I thought that was the definition of a dick move. But he's done some fantastic things in the car in any team that he's gone to.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to Fernando Alonso's career that nobody ever thinks of what happened in Singapore. some drivers, no matter how great they are, you think of their greatest sins. Michael Schumacher is inseparable from some of the more dramatic maneuvers. Ayrton Senna as well, perhaps Alain Prost to a degree, but nobody ever really talks about the fact that Fernando Alonso got his teammate to crash into a wall on purpose. A bunch of people got banned for life. Piquet Jr. got banned effectively, blacklisted from the sport. And Alonso continued on completely bulletproof from the fallout of what happened there. It was, it really says a lot about the kind of driver that he is, that people are willing to overlook that. And perhaps you talk about the tempestuous year with Lewis Hamilton in 2007, where Alonso's bad temper cost him the title. It cost Hamilton the title, although you can forgive Hamilton perhaps somewhat because Hamilton was in his first season of F1. Handed Kimi Raikkonen his title, and you can't help but feel that should have been the third. And all of these really ridiculous things that Fernando Alonso does just get forgotten about because he's such a sublime talent on the track.
I mean, Renault came out, didn't they, at the time of that and said Alonso didn't know about it. He had nothing to do with it, which, believe that.
Bullshit.
Take that with a pinch of salt. You called it. But yeah, Flavio Briatore got banned for life, didn't he? And this Flavio was, despite being, quite a fiery Italian, he was very popular on the grid and also amongst fans as well. He'd been in the sport for a really long time. He was a bit of a stalwart of that era. And yeah, he's not. I've seen him at a couple of racetracks, I think, just kind of popping in to say hello, but he's obviously never come back to the sport. And he was certainly an interesting figure. But that was, you're right, it doesn't really get mentioned that often. It's always Piquet and Renault, who were kind of chastised for it. And Alonso just got away scot-free.
Pat Simmons as well, a casualty of that particular. Pat Simmons was involved, but Pat Simmons was genuinely part of the elite leaders of F1, and after that he went to Virgin Manor Williams, and now he serves in FOM's governing body. But he could still have been there designing race-winning cars if it hadn't been for that particular incident.
So let's talk about Alonso's teammate then, because it will be interesting to see the impact Alonso has on Esteban Ocon. He's still pretty young. Ocon, 24 years old. He's definitely going to be benefiting from having Alonso as a teammate for that experienced kind of driver. Whether Alonso will be open enough with him or not to actually, teach him a couple of things, we don't know. Ocon's career is an interesting one because I really thought he was nailed on for the Mercedes seat. For that one season, that after that season he had out, I thought Mercedes would eventually drop Bottas, and Ocon, being the young driver that he was, quite successful, was going to be straight in there. But they kept Bottas, and Ocon moved on to Renault, and that's where he stayed ever since. And it seems that George Russell now is really kind of the golden boy, looking to take Mercedes into that's the future of Mercedes. So this season for Ocon, I think, being 24 years old, is a bit of a make or break season for him. And if it is a make season, if it really does end up with him doing quite well, can he go to a better team and actually succeed, win races, challenge for the championship?
It's so hard to say. He's got a good career on paper. He jumped from F3 into F1, where he finished out the end of the season for Manor Racing. And then he had a really good first full season, came 8th with 87 points. Only twice did he finish out of the points, and once it was because he retired when I believe he was hit, wasn't he, by his teammate in Brazil. That's a fabulous first full season. Points finishes across the board. He was unlucky to lose his racing point seat, but it was going to happen. You were going to keep Perez in that situation. And obviously, with Lawrence Stroll behind the team, Lance Stroll was getting the second seat. But he wasn't great last year, but he got progressively better. And that second place in Sakhir unique race, unique circumstances, but a second place. Renault's best result in their return to the sport. Better, it has to be said, than anything Daniel Ricciardo managed to do in the car, and nobody's questioning Ricciardo's pedigree. So where does it leave him? I struggle to see where he could go upwards. Aston Martin is locked down. One of the drivers effectively owns the team. The other one is a full-time world champion. Would he go to Ferrari? Unlikely. You don't see him getting the Mercedes seat now, as you said. Red Bull, no, I think Red Bull is waiting for Tsunoda. And yeah, where do you go? There aren't that many other teams above it. You can't go to AlphaTauri. Yeah, you might go to McLaren, I suppose, especially with the Mercedes link up now. But he, like a lot of drivers, is stuck. They need a batch of retirements. They need the old guard to leave. There is somebody, I'm sure, worthy, sat in Formula 2 or DTM, perhaps, if your name is Alex Albon, out of a drive because you've got two ancient drivers in Raikkonen and Alonso taking up seats. Hamilton and Vettel, towards the end of their career, you do have to ask how much longer will Sebastian Vettel be about for if his Aston Martin gamble doesn't pay off? And you do have to ask, is Lewis Hamilton going to get bored of dominating and leave? But where does he go? Unless Hamilton and Bottas both leave / get kicked from the team, there are no better seats available to him.
I mean, I could maybe see him going to Mercedes in a few years' time when Bottas is eventually removed from his seat or he leaves, because I think we are of the opinion that if Hamilton retires next year, Russell will be in that seat, and so potentially I think there is a chance for an Ocon-Russell partnership in the future, but Ocon will have to bide his time. The fact that he is 24 years old still, if we say that 3 years in the future is when Bottas leaves, even that might be a bit too far in the future, Ocon will only be 27. 27 is a peak age for Formula One drivers, I would say. I think that would be a good age to head to a top team. So I could see that. He's just going to have to bide his time, I think, is the way that it's going to have to go for him.
Well, to get a top seat team, you do need, really, unless you parachuted in as a young driver, to demonstrate consistency. It paid off for Checo Perez. He's had a career not unlike a slightly longer version of Ocon's, and it's culminated in a Red Bull drive. So it can be done. It just must be quite frustrating to sit there unable to go forwards.
Also depends what Mercedes would be looking for at that time. They might have a world champion in Russell already, or they certainly might be pushing him towards that. And maybe Ocon would be a perfect second driver given his talents. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on him there. Maybe they could both challenge for a world title. Well, let's move on to the predictions then for Alpine this year. So Renault came fifth last year with 181 points. That was pretty much double the points that they got in 2019, but they stayed in the same position. They finished fifth both years. Ricciardo came fifth as well in the Drivers' Championship with 119 points, and Ocon 12th with 62 points. Where do you think Alpine are going to finish this year?
It's tricky because I think if any team is an unknown quantity this coming season, surely it's Alpine. You can expect McLaren to continue the upward trend. Despite the change of team name, you can expect Aston Martin to stay in the top four. So what do you do about a potentially decent Alpine side? I think Alpine themselves are likely to finish sixth. The top four's out of their reach, barring a miracle, and you feel like Ferrari are going to get in just ahead. Surely Ferrari will improve, especially with a more functional second driver. It was pretty clear at the end of last year that Vettel wanted to be literally anywhere but in that seat. Now he's gone, and you've got a hungry young driver wanting to prove themselves at the highest level. You feel Ferrari going to get in front of them. Alonso, probably 11th. He's old, but he's still a fantastic racer, still capable of getting enough points consistently enough to keep him there. Ocon, 13th. It's that sort of grey middle area. Your top six are nailed on, your bottom six are nailed on. It's how do you slot them in between that? There's 4 places. I wrote and rewrote my predictions over and over again to work out where he was going. Alonso 11th, Ocon 13th, Alpine to finish 6th.
I mean, we don't, when we do our predictions for this, we don't talk about it necessarily in that much detail. It is a bit of an unknown. I never know what you're going to go for. You never know what I'm going to go for. I've gone exactly the same. I think Alpine will finish in 6th in the constructors title. Like you said, I think Ferrari will be better this year. And also you're absolutely right. It's that mid-table obscurity for those teams like Alpine and those drivers. You're right, Alonso is obviously still a talented driver. He's still got what it takes to score points. I think he'll come 11th. I think Ocon is not going to do quite as well as Alonso this season, and I think he'll come 13th too. So pretty much, so exactly spot on. Well, that brings us to the end of our Alpine podcast, and now we have done 2 uploads today. Like we said before, do check out the Mercedes one that we had uploaded earlier on today, and also, of course, thank you so much for listening and watching this one as well. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. As I say now at the end of every podcast, leave us a comment, tell us what you think about where the teams are going to finish, how you think Alonso is going to be doing in Formula One this year, and Ocon as well, what you think of the Alpine livery. We think it's beautiful. Tell us what you think. And also don't forget to turn those notifications on so that when we release our next podcast, you will get straight away a notification. You'll be able to listen to it immediately. Tomorrow is Aston Martin, which we're really looking forward to, I think. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all tomorrow.